Good morning, Soberinos, and welcome to this week's Friday Fix. Today, I'm going to be responding to a post that was left by Lacey, who said that she'd been visiting a friend's flat and had been triggered by their wine rack and had ended up getting some wine on the way home afterwards, and was asking the question about how to deal with visual triggers. Now, there isn't one simple answer that I can give to that question, but what I will do in today's video is give you a couple of ideas. And what I am going to suggest is that you visit the guidance program on the Go Get Sober website, because in the guidance program, there are lots and lots of instructions, activities, strategies, things that you can do to learn how to approach these triggering situations that are gonna help keep you strong and help keep you resilient and enable you to deal with those visual triggers. And I won't have time in one short video to be able to give you all of the content that's in the guidance program. So the best place you can look is the guidance program. I'll put a link somewhere in this post so you can get there easily. But the two approaches that I'm going to suggest to you in today's video are, number one, that you go into any new, potentially triggering, challenging, or any kind of situation where you might be feeling a little bit anxious about it, or where you suspect that there might be triggers or other people might be drinking, that you go into those situations planned and prepared. Now, I repeat myself a lot in these videos. I talk a lot about planning and preparation, but there is a good reason for that. If we are taken by surprise, even if it's something as simple as seeing a wine rack in somebody else's house, that can trigger us to the degree that we can kind of consciously lose control a bit. So our unconscious patterns and habits and routines take over. Our unconscious programming kicks in. Whereas if we've planned and prepared for that, we're less likely to slip up. So the first thing that I would suggest is that you plan and you prepare for going into any situation where you might be triggered or you might be challenged. And there are all sorts of things you can do to plan and prepare. You can plan and prepare in all sorts of ways. If, for instance, you know you're going into a situation, we're going to see visual triggers of alcohol everywhere. We're going to see alcohol in our friends' houses. We are going to see alcohol in supermarkets. We are going to see alcohol in cafes and restaurants. We are going to see alcohol and hear other people drinking alcohol in their gardens, by rivers, on beaches, in restaurants, at barbecues, at parties. We are surrounded by alcohol. We are surrounded by visual triggers. TV. We even hear people on the radio drinking together. There are triggers absolutely everywhere we go. We cannot avoid them. So yes, it is possible to hide yourself away from all of those triggers for a short while. And sometimes that might be a good thing to do. It might be desirable in the early days when you first stop drinking and you just want to get through what might be a particularly challenging time for you. If you need to hide yourself away from all that to make it easier on yourself, then by all means do. You do whatever you have to do to get yourself through in the early days. But at some point, you are going to have to learn how to navigate your way through a life that is filled with visual, auditory, and sensory triggers. A trigger can be something as simple as a person, somebody that you used to drink with. Every time you see them or every time you meet with them, you feel triggered to drink. A trigger can be a time of day, anytime it gets to a certain time of day. A trigger can be a feeling or an emotion. A trigger can be the weather or the temperature. There are more than just visual triggers. There are lots and lots of different types of triggers all around us. And at some point in learning to live our lives confidently sober, we need to find ways of living with those triggers, of navigating those triggers, of disabling those triggers so we no longer feel triggered when we're face to face with them. But going back to Lacey's question about dealing with visual triggers, and I'm going to include any other kind of trigger in that, it's about planning and preparing. So when you are ready or you need to go out into the world and to face some of these triggers, you need to plan and prepare. How do you do that? Well, first of all, you use your imagination in advance to imagine what it's going to be like when you're faced with that trigger. Imagine what it's going to be like. So if, for instance, you're visiting a friend's house and you know they've got a wine rack or they've got lots of booze on the side, or maybe they even have a little bar in their house, maybe they're going to offer you a drink, maybe they're going to be drinking themselves, maybe that's all going to be very triggering for you. The first thing you have to do is imagine it. You have to imagine the reality in advance of stepping into that reality. And that's what we call mental rehearsal. You're actually rehearsing what's going to happen, but you're doing it mentally before you go into it physically. So that's one thing you can do, is mentally rehearse it in advance and imagine what it's going to be like. And in your mental rehearsal, you can actually imagine what's going to be difficult for you. And you can imagine yourself overcoming those difficulties, finding ways to overcome those difficulties. So if, for instance, you know that you are going to see some alcohol when you visit your friends, you imagine yourself seeing the alcohol, feeling triggered, ignoring it, or maybe even you imagine yourself not feeling triggered, just accepting that the alcohol is there and you're going to ignore it, and you're going to walk away at the end of it, and you're going to go straight past the shop, you're going to go straight past the store, and you're not going to go in and buy yourself some alcohol. What you're going to do is you can plan something you're going to do instead, like going for a walk in the park, or going home and having a bath, or going home and getting into bed and reading a book, or something that you can choose that you know is something you can do positively for yourself, instead of going to the store, going to the shop and buying the alcohol and going home and drinking. So you plan what you're going to do instead. You might even, when you mentally rehearse what this situation is going to be like for you, you might even plan to take your own drink to make it easy on yourself. You might plan what you are going to say if somebody offers you a drink. You might plan what you're going to do after the event. Another thing you can do in terms of planning and preparation is you can actually rehearse. You can rehearse out loud in front of a mirror what you are going to say. Come up with a couple of phrases that you are going to say to people if they offer you a drink, or if they ask you why you're not drinking. And you can practice these out loud in front of a mirror before you even go into that situation. So you're already feeling confident. You're not feeling worried. You're not feeling nervous. You're not feeling anxious, because you're so confident with what you're going to say. It kind of just rolls off the tip of your tongue without you having to think about it. So it's really good to practice rehearsing what you're going to say out loud before you even go in. Now, there was something else I was going to say about that, and I'm trying to remember what it was. Let me just take a drink. So planning and preparation, mental rehearsal, imagining what the situation is going to be like. If it's something like you're walking to a friend's house, you're triggered by seeing some alcohol or a wine rack or whatever it might be, and then you have to walk past a store or you drive past a supermarket or whatever on the way home afterwards, what you might want to do in advance is kind of train your brain to understand that it is possible for you to walk past that store, to drive past that supermarket without buying alcohol. We kind of need to retrain our brains when we're learning how to live our lives sober, because we've developed patterns and routines that have become unconsciously established. So we can find ourselves pulling into the supermarket car park, being in the alcohol aisle in the supermarket, leaving the supermarket with the wine or whatever booze in our trolleys, in our bags, in our baskets, before we even know what's happening. And before we know it, we're home and we're having a drink. And that can all happen at an unconscious level because it's so ingrained. It's a pattern that we've become used to. So one of the things that we need to do is to kind of retrain our brains to do something differently. And we do this by practicing. One of the ways that we do this is by practicing. So it can be a really good idea to practice walking past that store at different times of the day without buying alcohol, and doing that in a situation where you know there's less pressure on you, where you're not triggered to drink. So let's say, for instance, you would be triggered to drink usually at 6 o'clock in the evening, maybe at 1 o'clock in the day, whatever it might be for you. And you imagine walking past that store around that time of day when you would be feeling triggered. Clearly, or when you're leaving your friend's house and you've just seen their wine rack, clearly that's going to be a more triggering time for you. So there's more pressure on you to be able to walk past that store and not go in and buy a drink. That's going to be harder in a moment where you're feeling triggered. Whereas if you choose different times of day, like when you know there's absolutely no pressure on you to go in and buy a drink, if you do that maybe at 9 o'clock in the morning or 8 in the morning just before you go to work, you actually make a point of walking past that shop, walking past the store, driving past the supermarket, walking through the supermarket, down the wine aisle, down the aisle that sells all the alcohol, at a time of day, and at a time of day when you know you are not going to be feeling under pressure to drink, and you keep repeating that process, because what that's doing is it's training your brain to understand that you can walk down the alcohol aisle in the supermarket without buying any alcohol. You can walk past the store without going in and buying any alcohol. You can drive past the supermarket and not go in and not buy any alcohol. And you practice doing these things when you're not under pressure to drink. And that way, when you are in a triggering situation and you find yourself walking past the store, driving past the supermarket, your brain already knows it's possible for you to do that. You're already changing the pattern. And so you're less likely to cave into the pressure and to go in and buy the alcohol. So there's two different approaches I'm suggesting there. One is doing a little bit of a mental rehearsal in advance of going into that situation, so you can plan and prepare things that you're going to do instead of drinking when you're being triggered or when you're feeling triggered. And the second thing is to practice doing those things when you're less under pressure to want to drink. So your brain actually gets used to the idea and starts feeling confident that you can do these things without drinking. But like I say, if you would like some more detail on how to do the planning and preparation, on how to do the mental rehearsal, if you want more information on activities and instructions and strategies that you can use to help yourself cope with those triggers more confidently, more happily, more healthily, and if you want tips on how to stay confidently sober, how to address some of the issues that have led to you needing to drink in the first place or wanting to drink in the first place, then I do recommend you go to the Go Get Sober website and you go to the guidance program, and you will find everything that you need in there. I'm going to talk more about this in next week's or in an upcoming live session. If you want to find out more about the live sessions, again, go to the Go Get Sober website and you'll find more information on there. The live sessions are available to Go Get Sober guidance members. It's super affordable and accessible to sign up. So if you're not already a member, I do recommend you go along and you sign up and you get access to all these wonderful resources. So I will look forward to seeing some of you at the next live session, and I will look forward to seeing all of you in tomorrow's Saturday Share, where I'm going to share with you and you're going to share with me what's good about living your Saturdays or your weekends sober. I'll look forward to seeing you then and hearing about everything that you're getting up to. In the meantime, let's go get sober together. Bye for now.